Sofia's bedroom was on the second floor, with a high ceiling, heavy velvet curtains, and dim light from a moon-shaped night lamp. Outside the window, the treetops in the Ward estate garden swayed in the New York night wind. Amara Lewis sat on the carpet, her back against the side of the small bed, arms gently cradling the little girl sleeping soundly. Sofia breathed softly, her soft curls falling over her forehead, each rise and fall of her chest as if she had finally found a safe place to anchor herself. The door swung open. A deep but icy voice rang out like shattering glass. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Amara startled and looked up. Elias Ward stood there, his black suit still pristine after a long day, tie slightly askew, but his gaze so cold it seemed to thicken the air. "You are not allowed to hold her like that." He stepped inside, each stride heavy. "You are the help, not her mother." Before Amara could react, Elias bent down and wrenched Sofia from her arms. The abruptness made Amara's chest tighten. Immediately, the sound of crying tore through the room. Sofia kicked and flailed, her tiny hands grasping the air as if searching for something lost. "No, please." Amara hurried to speak, trying to keep her voice calm. "She just fell asleep. She's been crying all evening." "I don't care." Elias cut her off, his voice almost a roar. "You work here to serve, not to replace." Sofia cried harder, her sobs jagged like knives slicing through the air. Elias, flustered, turned to soothe her. "Shh. Sofia. It's Daddy. Daddy's here." But the little girl only shook her head, her face flushed red, her breath hitching. Amara stood, her heart pounding, but her voice dropped low. "Give her back to me." Elias turned, his gaze trying to pin her in place. "I said give her back." Amara pressed each word, not raising her voice but making the air between them taut to the point of suffocation. "She's scared. And you're making her more scared." A long silence stretched. Elias's eyes wavered, still cold, but somewhere in them a flicker of hesitation, then surrender. He handed Sofia back to Amara. The moment she was in familiar arms, Sofia buried her face in Amara's chest, her cries dwindling to a few broken sobs. In less than half a minute, her breathing was steady again, her tiny hand gripping Amara's shirt as if afraid she might vanish. Amara sank to the carpet, rocking gently, whispering, "It's all right now, little one. I'm here." Elias stood motionless, his shadow long on the wooden floor. No one spoke again, but the whole room seemed colder than before. That night, Amara stayed awake beside Sofia. She did not leave, even when the little girl was deeply asleep. The next morning, Mrs. Whitmore walked in and found Amara sitting in the corner of the room, eyes wide open, one hand resting on the edge of the child's bed as if watching. She muttered softly, almost to herself, "She only sleeps when she's in her arms." At breakfast that morning, Elias didn't say a word. His tie was crooked, his coffee cold. But in the fleeting glance between him and Amara, something had shifted, small, elusive, but there. The second night at Ward House began like a perfect replica of the first. Amara had just laid Sofia down when the little girl's dark eyes flew wide open, her lips trembling before a cry broke free. At first, it was a few small sobs, but they quickly swelled into a long, choking wail, as if each hiccup tore the air in half. Hearing the sound, Mrs. Whitmore hurried in. She had lived in this house for over 20 years, but had never seen Sofia react so violently. "Let me try." She bent down, lifting the girl, her soothing voice as soft as silk. But Sofia kept struggling, hot tears soaking into the shoulder of her blouse. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Elias appeared, his face tense. "Give her to me." He took Sofia from Mrs. Whitmore's arms. Sofia did not calm down. On the contrary, her cries grew sharper and higher like a protest, her tiny hands reaching toward space. Amara stood still in the corner. Her heart raced, but there was a steadiness in her gaze. "You don't need to," Elias began, but before he could finish, Amara stepped forward. "Give her to me." He turned to look at her. For a moment, Elias's habitual pride seemed ready to dismiss the request, but the broken sobs from Sofia made him pause. He handed the child to Amara. The moment she was in Amara's arms, Sofia pressed her face into her neck, taking a long breath as if reclaiming a familiar scent. The crying dissolved into a few sniffles, then silence. Mrs. Whitmore stood watching, her usually stern eyes softened. "You're the only safety line she has," she murmured, almost to herself. Amara gently settled into the rocking chair, holding Sofia against her chest, swaying slowly. She looked at Elias through the dim light of the night lamp. She needs to feel safe before she needs anything else. Elias said nothing. His eyes lingered on the peacefully sleeping Sofia, then slowly lifted to meet Amara's the Sofia. The icy edge from the first night was gone, replaced by something more complicated: confusion, a hint of helplessness, and a flicker of gratitude. But instead of speaking, he nodded and turned to leave the room. As the door clicked shut, Mrs. Whitmore stepped closer, placing a hand on Amara's shoulder. "You may not believe it, but it's been a long time since Sofia has slept this peacefully." Amara didn't answer. She lowered her gaze to Sofia's serene face and whispered, "Sleep well, little one. I'm here now." That morning, winter sunlight streamed through the massive glass windows of the dining room, reflecting off the polished walnut table. The air in the Ward house was still quiet, but Amara could feel something had shifted since the night before. Elias sat at the head of the table, his white shirt neatly buttoned and his silver-gray tie in place, but the coffee in front of him remained untouched. He seemed to be waiting. "Sit down." His voice was deep, no longer carrying the icy edge she had first heard. Amara pulled out a chair quietly and sat, keeping the necessary distance. "There's something I want to show you." He opened a silver laptop and turned the screen toward her. On the screen was an app design. The logo read Horizon Care in a soothing blue. Beneath it were sections such as legal support, child care assistance, community connection, and an icon for an anonymous chat room. "This is a project I've been working on for over a year," Elias said, his eyes fixed on the screen. "A platform for single mothers, caregivers, and people like you." Amara frowned slightly. "People like me?" "Those who've been left behind." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "Those who know what it's like to stand alone against the whole world." The room was silent for a few seconds. Amara looked at the design, imagining faces, stories, long nights, much like her past. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Her voice calm, but with a trace of curiosity she couldn't hide. "Join the development team, not as some standard office employee, but as someone who can tell us the truth from the inside. I need your lived experience, not a cold report." Amara leaned back in her chair, thinking. The offer meant stepping into an entirely different world where every glance could be scrutinized and every decision she made could be dissected. "If I agree," she said slowly, "it has to be built on trust, not just when you need it, but all the way through." Elias tilted his head slightly. A faint smile so subtle it was almost imperceptible flickered at the corner of his mouth. "Then, we start today." At the far end of the table, Mrs. Whitmore quietly set down her teacup, saying nothing. But there was a glimmer in her eyes, as if she had just seen a door in this house open after years of being locked. That afternoon, the New York sky was a heavy gray, the wind carrying the chill of an approaching rain. Amara was in the playroom with Sofia, doodling together, the little girl's laughter like rare drops of sunshine inside the Ward mansion. The doorbell rang suddenly. Mrs. Whitmore went to answer it, but her voice dropped to an unusually low tone almost at once. "Elias, it's Claudia." The name made Elias, who was coming down the stairs, freeze mid-step. For a moment, his face showed surprise. Then it quickly hardened. Claudia stepped inside, as if the cold wind had come with her. A camel coat hugged her figure. Her wavy brown hair was perfectly in place, and her gray eyes shimmered with hesitation and calculation. "Elias." Her voice was soft, almost trembling. "I want to see her." Amara came out of the playroom, Sofia clinging tightly to her skirt, her wide eyes fixed on the stranger. "You've grown so much," Claudia murmured, forcing a smile. "Can Mommy?" Elias stepped forward, reaching to take Sofia. The little girl reluctantly left Amara's arms, lips pressed together, eyes never leaving her. Claudia opened her arms to embrace her daughter, but only a few seconds later, Sofia began to squirm, her breath hitching into small sobs, then breaking into real crying. "Shh. It's Mommy." Claudia tried to soothe her, but the more she did, the more complex the girl cried. Without thinking, Amara stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Give her to me." Sofia almost dove into Amara's arms, her crying fading into uneven breaths and soft sniffles. Claudia stood frozen. In her eyes flickered a pain laced with shock. She doesn't know me. Amara tightened her hold on the girl. She knows who stayed. Elias said nothing. The air thickened, broken only by the first patter of rain tapping against the window. Claudia turned to Elias, her voice cracking. Maybe I shouldn't have come. Elias watched as she turned away. The door closed, leaving behind a cold emptiness. Amara carried Sofia back to the playroom, whispering, "It's all right, little one. I'm here now." In the hallway, Mrs. Whitmore stood silently, following Amara's gaze full of unspoken meaning, as if she had just witnessed a gust of the past nearly sweeping away the fragile sense of safety the house had only begun to find. 2 days after the encounter with Claudia, Amara stood before the massive glass tower in the heart of Manhattan, the headquarters of Ward Global. Its facade reflected the silver-gray sky and the line of luxury cars parked along the curb. From where she stood, the building looked like a fortress belonging to another world. A world she had never imagined she would step into. Elias stepped out of a sleek black sedan, casually opening the door for her. "Ready?" he asked, his tone half serious, half reassuring. "I'm not sure," Amara replied, her eyes still fixed on the top floor of the building. "Good. Caution will keep you sharp." Elias gave a slight nod, leading her through the grand lobby. Everything gleamed so much inside that each footstep echoed like a reminder of the distance between her and the people in perfectly tailored suits gliding past. Some nodded politely at Elias, then looked at Amara as if trying to guess who she was. The main conference room was on the 28th floor. An oval-shaped table, black leather chairs, and a massive LED screen glowing with the Horizon Care logo dominated the space. Around a dozen people were already seated: engineers, product directors, and a few influential figures in the company. Elias opened the meeting, then unexpectedly introduced. "This is Amara Lewis. She'll be joining the Horizon Care project as a community advisor. You'll listen to her insights, as you would mine." A faint ripple of murmurs passed through the room. A man in a navy suit with a silk tie raised an eyebrow. "With all due respect, Mr. Ward, she doesn't have a tech background." Amara drew a slow, steady breath. She had known this moment would come. "You're right," she said firmly. "I don't write code, and I don't manage multi-million-dollar projects. But I know what it's like to stay awake 3 nights to keep a child safe. I know what the people Horizon Care aims to help will be looking for at 2 in the morning when they're scared and exhausted. And I know exactly how it feels to be left behind." The room went silent for a few seconds. The man said nothing more, his eyes dropping to the table. A young engineer at the far end finally spoke. "That anonymous forum idea she mentioned the other day. We tried a prototype. It has real potential." Elias tilted his head slightly, as if to hide the faint curve of a smile. The meeting continued, with Amara listening, taking notes, and occasionally interjecting with sharp, pointed questions. Each time she spoke, the room grew quieter, not from surprise, but because they were starting to pay attention. As they stepped into the hallway afterwards, Elias said quietly, "You just changed the way they see you." Amara didn't look back. "I don't need them to see me differently. I need them to see the people this project was built to serve." Elias stopped, his eyes lit with something rare, genuine respect. At the far end, Mrs. Whitmore stood waiting for the elevator. She caught Amara's gaze, and this time she smiled. That day, Ward Global's headquarters were busier than usual. The Horizon Care strategy meeting had just ended when Amara left the conference room to find Sofia. Mrs. Whitmore had brought the little girl to play in the building's designated children's area. But when Amara stepped in, Sofia's small chair was empty. A half-finished drawing lay on the table, streaks of blue and pink abandoned mid-stroke. "Where's Sofia?" Amara asked the receptionist in the play area. "She was right here. Just a few minutes ago," the woman stammered, her eyes darting quickly around the room. Amara's chest tightened. She immediately pulled out her phone and called Mrs. Whitmore. The older woman was on the floor below, her voice tinged with growing concern. "I thought she was with you." Amara didn't waste another word. She hung up and ran down the hallway, scanning every corner. Elias had just stepped out of the executive office when he saw her expression and instantly understood something was wrong. "Sofia?" he asked, his voice dropping, tense. "Gone." No further explanation was needed. Elias pulled out his phone and barked into it. Lock all exits. Check the cameras now. The crackle of radios filled the corridor. A security officer hurried up. We've got footage from the service elevator. The girl. She's with Gregory Hale. Amara and Elias exchanged a sharp glance, then bolted for the nearest stairwell. When the rooftop door swung open, a rush of wind hit them, carrying the low roar of the city below. Near the railing, Gregory was crouched in front of Sofia, his expression too friendly to be safe. She wanted to see the flowers on the roof, Gregory said when he saw them, his tone calm to the point of being unsettling. Sofia stood there, clutching her dress, eyes locked on Amara in a silent plea. Amara stepped forward, never taking her gaze off Gregory. Come here, Sofia. The little girl ran straight into her arms. Elias moved in, his voice low and steely. If I ever see you near my daughter again, losing your job will be the least of your problems. Gregory gave a thin smile, straightening up. Just a misunderstanding. Misunderstandings don't require the rooftop access code. Amara cut in, her eyes sharp as blades. A code issued only to senior management. Gregory paused for a fraction of a second before walking away, the smile still plastered on his face. Amara felt Sofia's small hand trembling in hers when the rooftop door closed behind them. Elias looked at her, his voice low but certain. He's not just an employee. He's a threat. Amara tightened her arm around Sofia's shoulders. Then we make sure we stay ahead of him. And in that moment, they both knew the battle had already begun. 3 days after the rooftop incident, the 30th floor boardroom of Ward Global felt colder than usual. Towering glass panels cast a silver-gray light over the long walnut table where 12 board members sat waiting. Elias Ward entered first, his dark suit immaculate, his gaze as sharp as a blade. Amara Lewis followed, dressed in a black blazer and white shirt, carrying a slim file, each step steady as if she had been preparing for this battle her entire life. Gregory Hale arrived last. He tried to maintain his usual composure, but when his eyes met Amara's, the constant smirk on his face faltered. We're meeting today because of certain irregularities in the company's financial and security systems, Elias began, his voice even but powerful enough to make the room fall silent. Gregory let out a mocking laugh. I suppose this is the latest performance? Amara calmly opened her file and slid a stack of papers toward the board. These are the account statements from the past 3 months and the internal access logs. All of them trace back to the same login ID. Yours, Gregory. An older board member leaned forward to examine the documents, his brows furrowing. This account is linked to transfers to an offshore shell company. Elias continued without looking away from Gregory. We also have evidence that this login ID was used to unlock the rooftop door when Sofia went missing. Gregory leaned back in his chair, his voice hardening. I want my lawyer here. You'll have one, Elias replied, ice in his tone after you leave this building with security. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Gregory rose slowly, his gaze sweeping across the table. Before leaving, he stopped in front of Amara. You think you've won? You're just a symbol to cover what this company is. Amara met his eyes, her voice low but each word crystal clear. Symbols last longer than traitors. Gregory's lips curled faintly before he turned and walked out. The door shut behind him, and his footsteps faded down the hall. No one in the boardroom spoke for a long moment. Finally, a younger board member broke the silence. We just dodged a ticking time bomb. Elias tilted his head toward Amara. And we still have someone to thank. Amara replied. Then thank me by keeping Horizon Care intact. Elias smiled faintly, but his eyes conveyed far more than any spoken gratitude could. The evening after the board meeting, Elias called Amara. His voice, so unlike its usual tone, was deep but softer. I owe you a dinner. Amara hesitated. I don't need. Not because you need it, because I want to. Elias cut in, and this time he didn't let her refuse. They met at a small Italian restaurant on a quiet street in Manhattan. It was nothing like the high-end venues Elias usually frequented. Warm yellow lighting, the scent of toasted bread mingled with wine, and soft jazz drifting like a slow-moving current. Elias had removed his suit jacket, rolling his shirt sleeves up slightly. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man. Why Horizon Care? Amara asked as they had just ordered. Elias stared into his glass of wine, his voice unhurried. Because before I was a CEO, I was a husband, then a widower, with a child who would only sleep in her mother's arms. When Emma died, Sofia cried for 3 straight months. Nothing could calm her. I thought I was going to lose her, too. Amara said nothing. Horizon Care isn't a business idea, Elias continued. It's my way of making amends for not being there for my child when she needed me most. And, he looked straight at her, you've reminded me that sometimes the people who aren't bound to you by blood are the ones who pull you back from the edge. The words made Amara lower her gaze. And you? Elias asked. Why agree to step into the world you've always avoided? Amara pressed her lips together. Because of Sofia. And because I'm tired of letting other people decide my worth. At that moment, the servers set their plates down, breaking the deep silence. But the air between them had shifted. They are no longer employers and employees, but 2 people sharing private fragments of themselves that they rarely show anyone. When they stepped out of the restaurant, the night wind was gentle. Elias paused at the car door, looking at Amara. One day, you'll realize. You've changed me and Sofia more than you think. Amara didn't reply, only smiled faintly. But as she got into the car, her heart beat faster than usual. Sofia slept peacefully in Amara's arms that night at the Ward house. And downstairs in his study, Elias sat gazing out at the city through the window, turning a glass of wine in his hand, and for the first time in many years, he didn't feel entirely alone. The rumors began like a small crack. At first, it was just a few blurry photos of Elias and Amara leaving an Italian restaurant, followed by a cryptic post on a finance forum. Ward Global CEO and his community advisor spotted at an intimate dinner. Just business? 3 days later, the tabloids splashed their headlines. The mystery woman in Elias Ward's life. Romance or PR stunt for Horizon Care. Amara's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Reporters camped outside the gates of Ward House. Some articles went further, digging into her past, the neighborhood she grew up in, her old jobs, even her bond with Sofia. Mrs. Whitmore walked into the living room with a newspaper, her face dark. They're turning you into a target. Amara set the paper down, her voice calm, but her eyes showing fatigue. I don't care what they write about me. But if they drag Sofia into this, I won't forgive them. At Ward Global's headquarters, Elias was in the middle of a meeting when his assistant handed him an iPad filled with sensational headlines. He skimmed them, then abruptly stood. Postpone the meeting. That evening, Elias came to Amara's room. He stood at the doorway, hands in his pockets, his expression serious but no longer cold. I know you'd rather avoid the noise, but staying silent now will let them write their version of the story. Amara crossed her arms. And what story do you intend to write? Elias Meterchaze. The truth. You're the person I've chosen to stand beside me, in the project and beyond it. Amara gave a small, bittersweet smile. You know they'll tear apart every word we say. Let them try, Elias replied, his voice like steel. They won't destroy something I'm willing to defend in the open. 2 days later, at the Horizon Care press conference, a reporter asked about his special relationship with Amara. Elias didn't dodge. She's not just my colleague. She's the woman who saved my daughter and changed my life. If anyone thinks this is a PR stunt, look me in the eyes and say that. The room fell silent for a few seconds before the rapid-fire clicks of camera shutters filled the air. Amara stood in the row beside him, feeling every eye on her. But for the first time, she didn't lower her head, because Elias had just laid everything on the table and chosen to stand with her in the middle of the storm. 2 months after the media storm, Horizon Care officially launched. The app reached over 1 million downloads in just 3 weeks, and more importantly, thousands of real stories had finally found their voice. In the 28th floor office of Ward Global, Elias looked out the window at Manhattan bathed in a golden sunset. Amara walked in, holding a folder. This is, Elias asked, the plan to establish the Lewis Foundation. Amara set the papers on the desk. A nonprofit organization separate from Ward Global, focused on direct support for single caregivers. I want to use what I've learned from Horizon Care, but go deeper with an on-the-ground intervention. Elias flipped through a few pages, his expression a mix of surprise and pride. You're leaving Horizon Care? Amara smiled. I'll stay, But this foundation will be my legacy. And Sofia's, if one day she wants to continue it. Elias sat in thought for a few seconds, then nodded. I'll back it. But only if you let me join as co-founder. Amara let out a small laugh. You can't pass up a chance to get involved in everything, can you? Not when it's this important, Elias replied, his eyes serious. That afternoon, they signed the founding documents together. Mrs. Whitmore stood at the door, watching with a rare smile, the kind she reserved for moments she knew would last. That night at Ward House, Sofia sat in Amara's lap, busy drawing a picture. When she finished, she handed it over. This is our family. In the picture, the three stood side by side under a star-filled sky. In the middle was a large heart, surrounded by strokes of blue, the color of horizon care. Amara looked at the drawing, her eyes misting. Elias stood beside her, saying nothing, just touching her shoulder. Outside, the city was still loud and restless, but inside the house, a new chapter had begun, not just for them, but for the thousands who would benefit from the legacy they had just set in motion. And for the first time, Amara believed the past was no longer a chain. It had become a foundation.